Welcome to this explainer. Let's kick things off with a number that's honestly almost impossible to wrap your head around. $8 trillion. That is the estimated total cost of a 20-year global conflict that was entirely sparked on one single fateful morning.
Today, we're tracking the sheer chaos that unfolded from September 11, 2001 to the eventual U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. We're going to dive right into the data to see exactly how the trajectory of the 21st century was altered forever. To make sense of it all, we're breaking this massive two-decade geopolitical shift into 6 key phases, starting with the attacks, moving through the military responses, the long hunt for bin Laden, the geopolitical stalemate, and finally the true human and economic costs. All right, Section 1, the September 11 attacks, and a morning of absolute chaos. The reports break down exactly how 19 hijackers operating in teams of 5 took over 4 commercial planes with terrifying execution. You had Mohammed Atsaz seizing Flight 1 just 15 minutes after takeoff, then Marwan al-Shehi, who was just 23 years old, commanding Flight 2. Hani Hanjour targeted the Pentagon, literally striking it a massive symbol of U.S. military might. And finally, Ziad Jarrah on Flight 4, which was headed for the U.S. Capitol but was ultimately brought down in a field because the passengers actually fought back.
When you track the events, it's terrifying how fast it all happened. The first plane was hijacked 15 minutes in. The second, exactly 30 minutes later, timed specifically so the world's media would be broadcasting it live. Just 1 hour after the crash, the South Tower collapsed, killing 1,000 people. The North Tower followed shortly after, where another 1,600 perished. In total, 3,000 casualties occurred, which tragically included 200 people who jumped from the burning buildings.
Moving on to Part 2, launching the War on Terror and the immediate fallout.
Right after the attacks, there was immediate and massive condemnation from major Islamic organizations and scholars. The OIC, the Grand Mufti of Mecca, and even Ayatollah Khamenei explicitly stated that these attacks completely violated Islamic teachings on protecting civilians. But despite that clear messaging, reports show that Islamophobia and hostility rapidly surged across Western countries, sparking intense debates and leading to discrimination globally. So, the geopolitical chess match begins. The U.S. identified Osama bin Laden and al-Qaeda as the culprits and demanded the Taliban government in Afghanistan hand him over immediately. The Taliban, however, pushed back. They requested proof of his involvement and offered to hold a trial in an independent third country. Well, the U.S. refused to negotiate, leading to a total, immediate geopolitical impasse. And things escalated fast. Within just 1 month of 9/11, the invasion kicked off. The rhetoric was intense. The campaign was labeled a war on terror, and even historically charged terms like crusade were thrown around. The Taliban government fell in a mere 3 months. Interestingly, during this super swift takeover, the U.S. bombed Al Jazeera's Kabul headquarters, which actively silenced the only major network that was airing footage of civilian casualties. After the collapse, Hamid Karzai was installed as the new leader at a conference over in Bonn, Germany. That brings us to Part 3, the Iraq distraction, and a massive shift in focus. Now, you might be wondering, if the Taliban were dismantled so quickly in late 2001, how in the world did they survive to wage a war for the next 2 decades? Well, it basically boils down to shifting priorities and a sequence of missteps. In 2003, the U.S. diverted huge military resources away from Afghanistan to invade Iraq and remove Saddam Hussein. This major distraction took the pressure right off the Taliban. At the same time, leaked photos of prisoner abuse by U.S. forces at Abu Ghraib prison completely shattered the American image in the region. The Taliban, led by Mullah Omar, capitalized on this global outrage and the U.S. military's collateral damage to Afghan tribes, using it as a powerful recruitment tool to regroup.
Section 4, Finding Osama bin Laden, the 10-year hunt.
Flash forward to 2004, right on the edge of the U.S. presidential elections. Bin Laden releases a video formally claiming full responsibility for the attacks. Reports suggest this moment actually played a huge role in bolstering George W. Bush's re-election campaign, because it sharply refocused the American public right back onto the ongoing war on terror. Then, a full decade later, on May 2nd, 2011, we get to Abbottabad, Pakistan. After scanning a compound via satellite and spotting a 6-foot man pacing the grounds, CIA operatives secretly cut down nearby trees just to allow for a landing. In the dead of night, 2 helicopters flew in from Jalalabad. In an intensely precise operation lasting just 40 minutes, bin Laden was killed, his DNA was tested, and he was buried at sea.
Now, the official story heavily praises U.S. intelligence for tracking him down independently. But investigative journalists like Seymour Hersh have reported a very different version of events. According to Hersh, it was actually a $25 million bounty that motivated a retired Pakistani intelligence officer, Colonel Iqbal Saad Khan, to just walk into the U.S. Embassy and leak bin Laden's exact location, which then led to the infamous fake vaccine campaign by the CIA to confirm it. Which leads into Part 5, the graveyard of empires. If the core objective was complete, why stick around for another 10 years? According to the sources, the U.S. stayed because the global chessboard was changing. China was rising as a massive superpower, and the U.S. felt the need to maintain a strategic presence to contain them. Plus, researchers had discovered incredibly valuable deposits of rare earth minerals right under Afghanistan, specifically lithium, which is literally the backbone of the modern global battery industry. The looming fear was that a U.S. exit would just hand these trillions of dollars in resources directly over to China. And yet, the final outcome of that strategy was a pretty jarring reality check. On one hand, you have 20 solid years of American funding, troop presence, and dedicated military training. But on the other hand, when the U.S. finally withdrew in 2021, the Afghan army collapsed almost instantly. The Taliban practically just walked back into Kabul without a fight in a matter of days. Finally, Part 6, the true cost of war, in both lives and wealth. The human toll here is just almost impossible to grasp. The war on terror resulted in an estimated 4.6 million direct and indirect casualties. And beyond that, a staggering 40 million people were displaced from their homes, turning them into refugees for decades. And the financial side? Just as massive. The U.S. took an immediate $1.4 trillion hit when the stock market crashed right after the attacks. Direct spending on the war itself crossed $2 trillion. But researchers at Brown University estimate that when you factor in all the long-term costs, this war effectively drained up to $8 trillion. But here's the thing, that economic pain wasn't shared evenly at all. While the U.S. GDP growth plummeted from around 5% to below 1% following the 2001 attacks, the defense industry was absolutely booming. Just as a direct example from the source, the CEO of weapons manufacturer Lockheed Martin saw his personal salary skyrocket from $5 million to $30 million during the conflict. So, despite an unparalleled 20-year intervention by the world's sole superpower and a truly unimaginable cost in blood and treasure, history inevitably repeated itself. Afghanistan once again reclaimed its age-old title, the graveyard of empires. So what does this ultimately tell us about the real limits of global military power? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.